And the problem of the current government in South Africa is also to treat colonization as a Jew, is to treat colonization as a leftover, as something that, left over and it is on its way out. And this is fundamentally wrong. Because
hey guys, as you're watching this video, our vision is to reach 500,000 subscribers. Hit the subscribe button, join membership to support our channel, join Patreon and PayPal. All the links are in the description. Do that to stand with us for this beautiful cause of One Africa right now. We do not forget to sign up for the petition. The link is down below. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Now, Black Skins, White Masks is basically largely, it is situated in the work of psychology, in particular psychoanalysis. And this is then because, until there was this book, a lot of psychological work that was observing natives, Negroes, Kafirs, or black people. I mean, at the time, you've got all sorts of names that are ascribed to people of color, in particular of African savages, and so on and so forth. Until that time, there had not been very coordinated, decent psychoanalytical work, and particularly a progressive psychoanalytical work that sought to understand the interrelations of black and white people under colonial conditions. Those that had attempted to do so reproduced, as well, racism. They reproduced the types of discourses and understandings of black people as inferior, as inherently incapable, as it were, of self-control, of self-possession, but also of sovereignty, which are basic traits attributed to the Enlightenment Western subject. So it's an important contribution in psychology. So all the revolutionaries in the world, particularly if you call yourself revolutionary, you've got to engage with this work. You've got to be able to, engage with Fanon's work, or at least related theory that tries to understand the psycho-social relationships that are constituted by colonization between black people and white people. Otherwise, you will reproduce socialist societies that are not disarticulated from racism. So this is a work in which Fanon is theorizing racial relations under colonization. And by colonization, we're very clear here. It's not the sort of traditional discourse of a country occupying another country and ruling it from the mother country or from the mother cities. Well, we mean something much more deeper. We mean the relationship between black and white people. Wherever that relationship exists, we call that relationship, or we discuss that under the broad category of colonization. Colonization, where race was used to structure society, to structure people, relationships to each other, and relationships to the means of subsistence, to the means of survival. Relationships to education, access to education, access to religion, access to art, access to sports, access to capital. A society in which those relationships were structured on the basis of race are colonial societies. Now, Fanon makes his intentions clear in Black Skins, White Masks, that he's looking at this dualism, the black and white people. He starts with a provocation, which it's important to immediately introduce, even at a level of trying to understand what Fanon is trying to do. A provocation here is that black people are not human. Is that a black person is not a human being. That's a basic proposition, a basic premise, a starting point. That he's going to try to understand a relationship between black and white people in which black people are not people. And they are trapped in this identity of them feeling and of them being treated, of them existing as subhuman, as non-human beings. He's got a concept which he calls a zone of non-being. It's a constant theme even in the Wretched of the Earth that Fanon uses. A zone of, he says there is a zone of non-being, and in it is located black people or Africans or the Negro, as it were. Black people are not human, and therefore black people in this relationship want human. So the second thing that he does is to say, what does the black man want? Or what do black people want? Black people want to be white. Under colonial conditions, black people want to be white. There is an entire set of processes, of signifiers that interpolate black people and structure them to desire to be white. Because to be human in a colonial society, to be human in a racist society, it is really to be white. Deal with this. And therefore, and he says to understand, this desire that black people have to escape the black condition, to escape their bodies through all sorts of mechanisms. To understand this, the concept specifically of psychological origins here is inferiority complex. To understand the inferiority complex that characterizes people in colonial societies. Fanon says, we have to apply psychoanalytical theory, a much more radical psychoanalytical theory, much more radical psychological investigation, which assumes, for Fanon, which does not attribute this problem to intuition, this problem to cerebral cortex, to some natural genetic evolution, but which attributes it, as it were, to the social and economic conditions of the societies that these people exist in. So, in a way, he's going to say your inferiority complex is not a problem of affiliation as a black person. A lot of liberal and racist discourse wants to make you feel that you are inferior because that is a natural thing about you as a black person. And Fanon says no, it is actually creating the mechanisms, the processes of colonization. And colonization is not, a once-off event. It's not like, Tahrir Square, like a systematic war which happened left. Colonialism is actually the structuring of society, the normalization, as it were, of war, of death, the normalization where that appears in the everyday engagements of people. We're not talking about a single book. We're not talking about, white people us and leave, and then the consequences of that traumatic experience. No. We are talking about a trauma that, is inserted into the everyday experience of black people. So the very mechanism, the very way of living, the way of existing in colonial societies does not allow black people to be anything else but inferior beings. And this is the problem under investigation in Black Skins, White Masks. Why are white people people have to create a society? Why do white people hate black people? Why do they have to create a society in which our inclusion and exclusion, in which they create all relations on the basis of the color of our skin? And we'll come and sort of break this down. So that the chapter, as it were, it's the book is divided into 8 chapters, 9 if you include the introduction, and we've already spoken about the introduction, which is where these set of provocations are set out by Frantz Fanon. So the first chapter is the black person or the Negro and language. And this is important because, you know, language is so basic to understanding who is human and who is not, who is human and who is a table, who is human and who is a dog, who is human and who is a tree. Language is important. Speaking is important, being heard. And he starts with, you know, a very, very powerful proposition there in the chapter on language. Fanon says, to speak means to be in a position to use a certain syntax to grasp the morphology of this or that language. But it means about to assume a culture, to support the weight of a civilization. Much more fundamentally, he says to speak is to exist absolutely for the other. You know, to speak is to enter, to enjoy. It is to participate in a specific culture. Already, when we start, culture is important. And not culture like, you know, a symbolic thing only, but as well as the very structure that supports, that makes the symbolic meanings and relations possible. Fanon will not ever succumb isolating the individual. He's a materialist like that. He will never succumb to isolating the individual and studying, you know, the individual in and of themselves. The individual is the foundation of themselves. His or her reason is the foundation of his existence. He's not into those things. Fanon will analyze the ways in which we feel, the ways we think, the ways in which we function. He will analyze them within the broader context of society, And already he says, you know, what I'm going to do is I take the economic conditions to be at the base of this inferiority complex, and secondly, that this inferiority complex is internalized, but it's primarily created by the material conditions out there, which is these colonial structures of coordinating who gets what, when, and how on the basis of the color of people's skin. So the Negro and language, and he recognizes. So firstly, you know, it's and the book is extremely autobiographical. He brings a lot of himself into the text, and as a style of writing, as activists, we have to adopt. You know, there's no other way to write as activists than to draw on our own experiences on the picket lines, than to draw on our own experiences in the struggle, and think about society, think about the rest of the whole world through our own experiences. It's a very powerful tool as a mechanism of writing. It's very important. That way, Fanon is not going to wait for a professor to find solutions for the problems that he confronts. On the picket lines, through his experiences, through what he feels, through what he sees, through what he hears from other people, the experiences of other people at war in Algeria, back at home in school, read the books that he was exposed to, all of those things, he brings himself, his lived experience, into the very activity of doing theory, into the very activity of thinking about what it is to be human. So, in a way, you know, one of the most important ways to access colonial life, to access the opportunities, to access everything that you know is in a colonial society, you have to speak the language of the master. Whether it's in the slave plantation, whether it's in South Africa, whether you're going to a mine, whether you are going to a university, language is important. It is about the language of the master. Already here you can see the significance, because it is through language that the black person comes to learn as well about the white civilization. It is through language that you come to understand the culture, of white people. It's about it's in the idioms, it's in the imageries, it's in the humor, and the entire cultural edifice of language. And to speak that language is to participate in the very culture of white people. And so in order to access life, because, let's just make a basic historical timeline, hypothetically, but we can see how this is possible in the very occurrence of colonization. So black people, are invaded by Europeans through massive destructive wars. And Europeans, in the massive destruction wars that they're interacting with Africans, kill some and then subjugate others in two ways. They extract them as commodities, as slaves, to sell them in the biggest human scandal in history, which is the transatlantic slave, but also to use them within the continent itself in agriculture as slaves, as well as in the mineral extraction projects. But ultimately, these begin to structure these colonial societies, and in the processes of war, conquest, and the aftermath of the structuring of that society after conquest, the important relationship, the first very form of being able to interact with these colonizers is through language. So when you speak English, when you speak Afrikaans, when you speak French, when you speak Spanish, Portuguese, German, and all those things, as a native, as a Negro, it's not like you are participating in an equal exchange. You are trying to get a job. You're trying to be educated so that you are able to get access to the opportunities in order to sustain yourself. And those who don't speak, European languages suffer a great deal, almost are sort of forgotten. They disappear, as it were, in front of them, of the eyes of other natives, but also in front of the eyes of others. But in the process of language, Fanon also realizes that you get into language, but you realize that it's not your language, and you are reminded all times that English is not your mother tongue, English is not your language, and so you are conscious of the fact that it's not your language. And as a result, because you feel that it's not your language, you have this, but at the same time you want to participate, because in speaking English you get access to these forms of life that yourself. In the process, you try so much, you try so hard, to perfect it. So Fanon, takes us through a journey of black people and the ways in which, particularly when they are in France, when they are in America, when they are in the colonies, when they are in towns, in cities, they overcompensate in the ways in which they speak. And he says this overcompensation in speaking is the struggle for recognition. It is wanting to be accepted by white people, that, wow, you speak English so well, it's so Shakespearean. Oh, look at the nigger is speaking so much good English. And then somehow this is important for you, because then it means somehow you feel like, hey, they are recognizing me as somebody who speaks like them. And sometimes even are able to delineate, as I'm doing now, to deconstruct. You are able to speak so good English, such a perfect English that a dirty working class Englishman or woman, some peasant, can't even participate. You are able to quote, the classics within, that particular culture, whether it's German, whether it's English literature, whatever it may be, you champion these things. The moment at which you feel like, you speak, you are now going to be seen, because you sound like them, you're going to be seen as part of them. Fanon says you realize, and you're constantly reminded that, no, you're a nigger. you are black, you'll never be white. So even through language, we are unable to gain recognition. As a result, you withdraw into inferiority complex. You withdraw into feeling a sense of self-hate, a sense of self-negation, because it doesn't matter how much good English, how much European languages we speak, we just never attain recognition as equals. Even if we sound like white people, but we still cannot be accepted by white people as part of them, as equal to them. I mean, you know, this is important. It sounds very banal, but it's very important, because in the movements of in the historic movements of people across the continent, when black people during the was such, you know, interaction and the collapse and recollapse and renegotiation of languages, that all you needed to do to enter a culture is to speak the language of those people and then participate in that culture. But with white people, you can speak however you want. You'll never be equal to them in a colonial society. So language, but also language, therefore, in a colonial society, serves as a tool of humiliation, of the humiliation of black people. It serves as a tool as well through which black people humiliate themselves, come to recognize as subservient beings, and this also you know, explains that when a German is trying to speak French, those two people, a French white person, a German white person, when they are trying to speak the languages of each other, you know, it's admiration. It's like admiring the culture of two equal, you know, civilized people. You know, white people even deeply have in the ways in which they encounter with us. That's why they don't speak our language. They don't even have the desire to speak our language, because to speak our language takes you anywhere. Anywhere. To be a perfect in Sesotho in a colonial world doesn't take you anywhere, doesn't create any opportunities. It will make you be accepted in Harvard. It will not make you participate even in the fourth industrial revolution. And this is created, Fanon says, by colonization itself. But also the question of language serves as a modus operandi of how people, you know, discriminate against each other as well. Those who speak English amongst black people sort of think of themselves as having attained a superiority, as having attained a certain, a little bit of humanity, and they look down because of inferiority complex. You know, they look down at other black people who can't speak English, who can't participate of European signs and symbolisms. So for inclusion and exclusion, language serves as a very important mechanism in a colonial society. That's what the first chapter does for Frantz, is to raise the significance, as it were, of language. Now the next two chapters is also, or they also unpack this question of the desire of black people to want to be white. And I want to emphasize here this desire, because it becomes one of the biggest impediments in post-colonial societies. If you don't admit, and the culture sort of shared inferiority complex that we're living in colonial societies, we make mistakes, we reproduce. So we have this internalized desire to want to escape, and so part of this, firstly, is the language we want to speak and participate, but also we don't have any other option. The reality is, in order to advance in society, in order to get anywhere, no matter how talented you are, you gotta speak the language of the master. So it is impossible to exist without speaking the language of the master. As a result, we all desire the language of the master. As we speak the language of the master, we realize the master still doesn't see us. Even when we sound like the master still doesn't see us as equal. He doesn't see us as equal to him, or as equal to herself. So in this journey of desire to wanting to be wide, language is the first. The second one is dealt with in these 2 chapters, which are relationships. You know, the black man and the white woman, the black woman and the white man. So Fanon says part, and here he's trying to trace the failure even of love. You know, very powerful thing. You know, you will think love is the universal language. You know, you'll think love must be able to collapse racism. Fanon says, hey, it's a big problem. Even in the act of love, he gives a very powerful definition. You know, he says, to love is to wish for the other that which one possesses for themselves. You know, it's the same thing as language. You know, to exist simply for that. Love is to fall into to wish a thing for the other that you wish for yourself, that you postulate for yourself. That feeling, that thing that makes us be attracted to a person, to be infatuated, to start speaking in tongues, to start doing poetry, you know, all those things. When you look at the white woman, you feel this love, and then you go and you want to love the white woman. Someone says, even that act doesn't get you recognized as equal to white people. It's humorous for me because, you know, love is supposed to be powerful. Even Jesus Christ teaches us love. But love fails. Love fails. That's why Martin Luther King used to say, the most segregated hour in America is Sunday morning when people are at church. The most racially segregated hour. So even the movement of love, Christianity, couldn't make people look at us and see themselves. They look at us and they still see an animal that they can domesticate. So with love, as Fanon tries to track this desire to be wide, desire to be loved back. That's the tragedy of love, isn't it? The tragedy of love is precisely that in loving, you desire to be loved back. You can love the white woman, but you need the white woman to love you back. You can love the white man, you need the white man to love you back. We love what is integrated, what is inevitable in love is the desire to be loved back. And Fanon says that racism distorts, as it were, these relationships in which black people, because of this inferiority complex, you know, they enter society through interracial relationship, and they are still traumatized because even with the attainment of a white partner, the white world still rejects them. The white world still, you know, treats them, as it were, as inferior beings. Fanon also, you know, talks about some ideologies between these interracial, you know, love relationships, which they're structured by all types of myths, all types of pathological attitudes of the over-sexualized black men, you know, black men thinking that a woman is really a big achievement, you know. Anyway, marrying in general, people take it as an achievement. How much more when you got, you know, the medal? If you can even enter the medal, that is the biggest achievement. Fanon engages this and tries to show that an inferior person traumatized in a colonial society, love is impossible in a colonial society. It is impossible to outside the ways in which this society is structured as a society in which black people are inferior beings. And even love fails to articulate that. Loving does not help us be recognized by white people. How much more about forgiving them? I'm coming to that. So those 2 chapters, this you know, failure of love. And desire is important here, to desire and to want to be desired. to desire to speak, you want to be spoken to, you want a response. Hello, a response. Molweni, sanbonani, dumela, meaning say something, agree, dumela, you know. So it is always about having the other respond. It's a desire to be exchanged, as it were. But it fails, even that exchange between white and black people, even if they speak the same language, even if they love one another, the love is structured by the relationship of racism, as it were. Chapter 2 and 3 deal, as I said, with this powerful question of love. You know, sort of moves to try now and look at in chapter 4 and 5, what you get is an explanation, as it were. He now deals with inferiority complex. He gives a psychoanalytic deconstruction. I'm really being simplistic here, because Fanon takes not just from psychoanalytical theorists to do a critique. He goes literary theory, he goes to Marxism. He's firing at these colonial relations with every progressive critical social theory. But at the core, really, is trying to analyze psychological mental illnesses. So, it's called dependency comes of colonized people and the fact of blackness. I don't want us from these chapters. Fanon wants us to accept our position. So he comes to theorize what it means to be black in a society. Firstly, there is no definition of black people outside white people, or there's no definition of whiteness outside blackness. There's definition of blackness outside whiteness. The two are interrelated. They are one thing. So you can't understand the black existence in isolation from white existence. You can't understand the other. This is important. So, and then in this duality, black people mean the zone of non-being. They exist as subhuman. They exist as the other. Firstly, Fanon talks about black people as bodies without minds, so without consciousness. If consciousness, it is the sign that I am more than my body. That if I lose my arm, I still have a lot of intellectual capabilities and I can participate in the intellectual society. Black people are reduced to this. That's why Verwoerd would say, of Wood, it was a reduction of black people to their bodies. That all they can do is manual labor. So black people as bodies, that's the first thing. We are our body reduced because of the skin color. So this pathology leads black people to do all sorts of things to try and escape, because it's not nice to be described in this negative term. So you do all sorts of things to try and escape the color of your skin. And there is an entire industry and people who have made lots of money out of black people's desire to be out of their black skins. Tragic. Softening their hair, all sorts of pathological sicknesses that we hate to admit sometimes. But the reduction of the body is as well sexualized, the image of black men as sexual objects. And Fanon traces these images, he demonstrates them in the different literatures of racist colonial discourse. And he says they have actually survived even post the sort of legal structures of racism, of colonization, the deep-seated attitudes white people have that we are sexual symbol. A black man is just a walking penis. You know, and he demonstrates this in ways that I don't have time to get into. But the fact is, the racist, deep-seated fantasies that are rooted in the wide perception of black people. We are our bodies, you know, firstly is the skin color, then we are just sexual objects. We just like, all we want is to have sex. That's why, you know, when you're dealing with poor white people, you'll never have themes such as, you know, they're making too many babies. But when you're dealing with black poor people, their sexuality immediately comes into mind. But they're making babies they can't afford. Because, you know, it's black people. Sex to them is like this thing they can't control. But also, if immediately white people describe black people that way, the black man in particular that way, Fanon says part of what happens, describe the black man as this titan of sexual, you know, embedded in that a desire that, you know, white people will have. So part of why Fanon says, you know, the problem of white rejection of blacks is the envy of their sexual wildness. You know, the black man as an inevitable rapist as well. And this is important also with regards to black women. They are sexualized, they are over-sexualized. I don't have to go very far for particularly the South African audience to appreciate this. Than Sarah Bartman, but also the slaves in the plantations in North America. Terrible, terrible, terrible stories where women are just tools for the reproduction of slaves, and they are overly sexualized as well. So black people as bodies, they are bodies. Fanon then also shows how embedded blackness is the theme of evil. To be black in black is sinful, immorality, evil. It is the penultimate sign. I mean, not the penultimate sign, the ultimate sign of evil, to be dark. So the entire literature, the imageries, comics, you know, he actually employs and surveys and says if we actually did it today, but if we did that in the 1930s, if we did that in the 1950s, we realize that even in the child stories that white people tell of each other, the symbol of evil is always some dark digger and of savages. So he famously, you know, uses the story of Tarzan. When it's shown in the continent, it has a different meaning. When it's shown in a predominantly white society, it has a different meaning. And then black people as things, black people as things. So inside the black category is invested everything that can be reduced to nothing. Inside the category of blackness, and because of this black history, black culture, black religion, all of it is demonized, bastardized as something that is inferior, as something that is not of a human civilization. And black people need to be saved almost. Their savage ways. They need to be saved from their religion. They need to be saved from their language. They need to be saved from their culture. They need to be saved at times from barbarism. And they constantly live under colonial societies to be supervised that they don't, you know, return and they become savages, because that scares white people. So white people are very scared, as it were, and they'll kill you. Once that fear overwhelms them, they can actually kill you. They can kill you. So part of how the killings of black people happen, you realize these dimensions of the deep-seated attitudes that white people hold about blacks. So he says in the lynching activities in Northern America, you see the constant obsession with castration, with cutting the genitalia of black people. In torture, you see the constant obsession with what is between the legs of black people, with their sexualized organs. So he delineates this. I mean, you will know as well when you hear of the torture stories of a lot of black people in South Africa under apartheid. So within this category, blackness is non-human, it is nothingness. But within the category of whiteness, it is invested human, it is invested good things, it is invested a moral subject, a subject capable of self-control, a subject that is able to rise above the emotions, the instincts, that is able to rise above, their body, as it were. In the white category, it's truly to be human, but also it means civilization. It means the creators of the steam engine, the creators of the big civilizations of capitalist industrial development. And everyone wants to be like them. That's why everybody wants to keep them in progress. I mean, at a basic level here, compatriots and comrades, we have to realize here, who doesn't want to be part of something good? Who, when I do something good, will think I'm being inferior if I say, wow, that's brilliant, I'd like to be part of it. Okay? At first, that is just an authentic wanting to participate in what is great, in what is nice, in what is beautiful. But as soon as you participate in that, you realize that the cultural mechanisms view you as a person that is inferior, that is incapable of participating, creating, co-creating, being creative in the white civilization. That your role in this white civilization is as a permanent, constant, subservient being who must your role is to admire white people. You can never be them. Meaning your role is to admire their civilization, and you can only participate in that civilization under their supervision. And if they withdraw, you fall apart, you fall into barbarism, into slavery, and so on and so forth. So this inferiority complex that we get into because of not being accepted in the white world, Fanon insists it is created by white people themselves, not created by us. So he wants to say to black people, do not blame yourselves for feeling inferior. Just because it is happening in you, you may be tempted to analyze it as something responsible for. Fanon says it is because of the socio-economic conditions structured to always relate to you as a subservient being, as a black thing, as a black body, as an over-sexualized black body that has no self-control, incapable of capitalist civilization, as it were. They will, and Fanon says it does, and he says, black people then enter. Part of what they want to do is dig in the past and tell them about Mapungubwe civilization, and try to demonstrate to white people that they themselves, on their own as black people, they've been able to achieve wonderful achievements. But he says, even if you present all these things in front of white people have not. There is no previous civilization in Egypt or in Mapungubwe that gives you a certificate to be an equal human being in a white-dominated society. And Fanon even says negritude. He says even something like negritude, which was a movement, particularly in the creative, literary, francophone world, and the movement of negritude, in which there was an attempt to make black people not bad about being blacks, to accept that we've got kafare, that we have the history where we worship ancestors. So, okay, even when we do that, he says there is an entire metaphysical discourse that is mobilized to say that is just a stage. is just a stage in the broader development of consciousness, of full humanity. You're not yet human. Even when you want to feel comfortable in your skin, they say, no, it's a stage before you can actually just, cross into being non-racial. So black consciousness is just a stage in the development. So there's nothing we can do. We are never full subjects. We are never fully human. We are always just amper human. So that's what these chapters do. And of course, much, even more radical moves that Fanon does. So in a way, when we are acculturated under colonization, we see the world through white eyes. We see the world through white eyes. So what do white people see when they look at the world? They see black people as inferior beings. As a result, we adopt a white consciousness of ourselves. We also look at ourselves through white eyes as non-beings, and this reproduces the inferiority complex, and then you therefore in all types of conversations to try and flight and escape the black condition, this category of non-humanness. So white colonial societies are white-dominated societies in which the only voice that matters, the only language that matters, the only ideas that matter are white ideas, white language, and the view of the world. Fanon refuses to even be mobilized that there is some sense of being able to constitute, a project within colonization where, you withdraw into some Bantustan and begin to invest in Sesotho, you start dressing like you used to dress and so on and so forth. He says you do that precisely in a society that is dominated by white, that needs you to act like that needs you to view yourself as trapped in a pre-colonial mode of, as a person who cannot progress, who cannot choose their destiny, who cannot decide when and how to become what they want to be. They will decide for you who you are. So in the white world, the idea that dominates of the world is a white perspective. And this is the fact of blackness. This is the fact of racism. This is the reality that we are confronted with. So in a way, even when you try to launch within, you do what is called immanent critique. You use white ideas to try and tackle white supremacy down. So these ideas, one of these theories, which are psychoanalytical theories, are observed in the chapters that deal with the Negro and psychopathology, as well as the Negro and recognition. So Fanon tries to say, okay, let's see what are the ideas available, what are the tools available to black people to try and fight back, to try and sort of turn whiteness on its head. So he says, actually, when we go there, and one of the powerful ones, because it's so powerful for progressive thinkers, particularly for the history of the Marxist tradition, is dialectics, the Hegelian dialectics. And Fanon says the Hegelian dialectic has, in a way, in its application in this problem of racism, has two problems. The first one is the Hegelian dialectic depends on mutual recognition, depends on absolute mutual recognition, in which I see myself in the other. And he says in the process, because there's a picking up here of the analogy of the slave, where the slave desires freedom and then engages in the struggle to get out of slavery, and they are willing to die. They are willing to pay even the price of death to get out of slavery. And because of this struggle to the death, the master is defeated. And the result the basic synthesis is mutual recognition. We recognize each other as people who cannot be slaves to each other. But he says in the black category, this is almost impossible because black people have no ontological resistance, meaning they're human. So it's like trying to do dialectics between a monkey and a human being, dog and a human being. The human being will just never recognize a dog as a human being. So even if a dog can fight, even if you go to the Kruger National Park there, you are attacked by a lion, and the lion doesn't want to be captured by you. It fights, and it kills you. Humanity will never agree that the lion is equal to them. So the struggle to death of the lion is existing outside the human category. So the struggle to death, even if we fight towards the death, white people still don't recognize us as equal. But the second tragedy of the dialectic of this slave emancipation, he says there's a big scandal that happens. And this is really the final thing I will say and try to apply it, in post-apartheid South Africa. Fanon says there's a big scandal. At some point there was slavery, and without much of a struggle, there was just a declaration, an international declaration that the slavery has now ended. Like people sat somewhere and negotiated on behalf of all of us, and then slavery ended. And he says, majority of the free colonial countries, there was never a struggle to the death with the absolute preparedness to use all violence against the masters, such that the masters came to appreciate and understand, that these people are like us. You will never be able to oppress them, because when you oppress them, they will fight. They rather die than live in chains. Fanon says there is a huge part of the black world that actually didn't engage in this. And as a result, in a post-colonial world, they live with this aggression. They live with this aggression that they must bottle up. They know that white people don't recognize them as fellow human beings. They know, they live with a constant suspicion, that one day I will show this white man that, I'm not here. Because, white people tell you, we gave you your freedom. So the freedom of black people, when it is negotiated, it is a freedom that was attained without the price. It is a free freedom. And it's a gift. It's like, at some point we realized that apartheid is not good. So we removed it and we implemented democracy. Still, this democracy is a gift from white people. They understand themselves. They think they are part of bringing democracy into South Africa. They believe that part of the liberation, part of the 1994, is made possible by their efforts, by their moral consciousness, by their being so human that they realize, no, apartheid is bad. Let's remove it. Again, post-apartheid, you think you are equal to people who gave you, who gifted you your freedom. Fanon says this is the failure, of the application of. There was no struggle to the death in some of these liberated countries, but also it creates a big problem because the constant desire, the infatuation, what Lushaba calls the infatuation with whiteness, the infatuation with white civilization. We have to battle with the fact that we actually want to be included. So when we are included without a fight, we are okay. We are happy. When we are negotiated that you'll take the land in stages, you'll take land in 10% in 30 years, 10% in the next 30 years, so that there is a gradual development to your humanity, so that there is a gradual development to you attaining full economic autonomy, so that there is because if we do it abruptly, there will be barbarism. Black people will kill each other. You won't handle it, so you have to be slow. You have to implement. We are still being dictated to the conditions of our own liberation. A liberation that comes that way. We battle because he says that we allow it because of this desire, this infatuation that comes out of the very fact of being oppressed, this desire to want to be included, this desire to want to be part of the white society, of the white symbolic constitution, of the white symbolic world. The final point that I want to make, and this is a very powerful and important concept, that revolution, because you might think I'm talking about some past, some distant past of something that has passed. And the problem of the current government in South Africa is also to treat colonization as a Jew, is to treat colonization as a leftover, as something that, left over and it is on its way out. And this is fundamentally wrong because in true Fanenian norm, you have to realize that the powerful, important concept that psychology gives us in the criticism and the theory of Fanon, that's us to appreciate that actually the 1994 Democratic Constitution has advanced and reproduced white domination. What helps explain on proper theoretical grounds is if our starting point is Fanon and through the concept of the collective unconscious, that to act out racism, that racism, a deep-seated negative attitudes and negative fantasies of white people, deep-seated racism was never something that was always conscious. Even when you asked white people under apartheid, they thought that their being advanced, their success was based on their own hard work, on their own intelligence, on their own business. Even when you ask them under apartheid, that's how they will react, which is how they react now. Their being able to be successful, their being able to be prosperous has to do with their individual capabilities. They deny that there is a structural assistance, that there is a structural, cultural, economic mechanism that produces them as superior, as successful, at the expense of black people. They deny this. And be able to appreciate how this happens is precisely to be aware that racism is not actually a very conscious act. It sits in the repressive aspects of the mental practice, the unconscious. It's what Jesus Christ says on the cross. Forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. How can you do something that you don't know that you are doing? So Jesus Christ was saying something psychoanalytical there. It's powerful. It's like, in Das Kapital, when Karl Marx is trying to explain communism, that in the market we treat commodities as if they've got a life of their own, as if it's a relationship between the money as a commodity form and a specific a commodity, a specific thing that you are buying, a carrot or a book or a cell phone. We do this, and he says we do it. We don't know that we are doing it, but that's precisely how we are doing it. We pretend as if these commodities have a relationship of themselves, between themselves. We do not want to see the truth about these commodities, and that they are created by other human beings. They represent social relations, and they represent these social relations between those who own the factories and those who work for those who own the factories. And in this relationship, there are all forms of abuse and for that product to arrive at the market, and for you to pretend as if that product doesn't represent a serious injustice in society. So you mask yourself, or you so in a way, this has the similar function in society through a collective cultural practice, wherein deep-seated are hidden, repressed attitudes that, black people, they're incapable of all forms of self-autonomy, forms of self-possession, all forms of self-creativity, of leading themselves. They're incapable of capitalist civilization. So the colonial unconscious, see it in a post-apartheid South Africa. the collective unconscious is precisely that white people, even to this day, and now they are assisted by the democratic government, in which we think, no, racist attitudes don't structure access to loans in the bank. Racist attitudes don't structure access to better schools. Racist attitudes don't structure access to better sports facilities, better deals in the music industry, better deals in the arts, in the fine arts, the better studios. It's about the criterion of the bank. It's about creativity. And where you see this pathological denial of racism is precisely with anthropologists who are made to believe, there's going to be this money put in the bank. You just have to go to the bank and demonstrate your brilliant idea. A lot of brilliant black people, far much more creative than many rich whites out there. Their creativity has not helped them to become any nearly rich as people, because what structured access to these things remains racist attitudes that no longer have to be admitted, that no longer be admitted, that no longer have to be represented in law. White supremacy has reached its highest form in that it no longer needs a law in order to survive. The very cultural, symbolic, capitalist mode of doing production allows them to live out their racist attitudes without saying them. So they're able to deny you, they're able to deny you access to a school without saying you are black, without saying because you are black, but using other mechanisms. You don't qualify, you're not yet good, go and maybe try this type of course before you come. Are you educated? I mean, the painfulness of education in South Africa is that we're led by a lot of illiterate whites, a lot of dropouts. And when a white person has dropped out from school, it's natural. They become rich. We clap hands, mawe. We celebrate. But how many black people who drop out of school don't even get any loans to a bank to get a loan, anywhere close, or be even entertained by investors? They will need another person if they've got a real, genuine product that white people want to exploit. They will need a white supervision in order to be included in the social capitalist form of living. That is what racism does. What and how far. And if we are genuine, if we truly want liberation, Fanon says we have to realize that we have been seriously damaged. We have so participated in the world through the white gaze, through the white eyes. We have so conducted ourselves as if we are white, that we never attain that whiteness. As a result, we have tremendous damage of inferiority, which comes out of the constant fascination and constant desire for white affirmation, for white applause, for white inclusion, to be seen, to be recognized, to be accepted in the white world. And this white world no longer has to call itself white. It just calls itself civilized. It calls itself capitalist. And in it, we can't help but always see that the color of our skin always forecloses our capacity to truly break out of the black condition. We have to admit, but part of what we have to admit about this inferiority complex is not to blame ourselves. Don't blame your fellow when you see them out there neurosis of skin whitening every week, spending millions trying to be white in complexion. Don't blame them. Help them to realize how that is a creation of the cultural, socio-economic domination of white people. Don't blame brother. Don't blame your fellow Africans. You know, when everything they do every day is to try as much as possible to get closer and be accepted and be reconciled with white people. Don't blame them. Show them how it is in itself created by the cultural white supremacist domination, in which we grow up to come and see ourselves in the ways in which white people see us. As we get disappointed by that, we enter into all sorts of self-destructive behavior. That the true revolutionary moment, the true revolutionary project comes out of confronting the system apologetically, that death must be part of what we are willing to pay to live fully as human beings, to live without apology to white people. That we must be able to do every revolutionary act possible, including violence. That we must fight as much as we can, never to live again with an apology of why we want it, why we want to be citizens that don't have to apologize to anybody for being citizens, that don't have to make excuses for why we want the land, why we want the mines, why we want to be part of, you know, the prosperous reproduction life in South Africa. That revolutionary capacity, that revolutionary moment, that has to come with the determination to pay with death. Fanon says that. So in conclusion, you know, I really think there's a revolutionary duty to see, therefore, the significance of the tools of analysis that Fanon gives us. And that's why the EFF will never ever resist, you know, will never get out the reliance on to understand the world. That's why we call him, you know, an ideological compatriot, an ideological partner. You know, from him we come out with an understanding of this specific oppression and oppressive system called colonization. And colonization is over. Colonization is not over. So it has so perfectly evolved, it has so brilliantly evolved that it no longer needs to be obvious. It no longer has to be performed consciously. They don't have to call you kafir. They don't have to have separate toilets. They have separate roads. They don't no longer need that. Capitalist property relations allow them to establish an entire estate without you. The ownership of the banks allows them to make sure that 70% of the circulation of money in society and property and richness ends in the hands of white people. They don't need racist laws to continue to act out their racism, to continue to live as superior beings in society and in the rest of the world. This is the colonial condition. But we have to unite. You have to realize, we have to admit that there is this problem. And if we are to get ourselves out of impasse, out of being treated as non-human beings, we have to be prepared to end. We have to be prepared to end well, because in any way, we are non-existent. And that fight must be unapologetic, but it must also depend on the solidarity of Black people across the world. The obvious question here is to ask me if white people can contribute. The proper attitude is that we don't care. That's the proper attitude. It should be dismissive. There has to be confrontation. So through Fanon, that's what we come to understand. Revolutionaries, thank you so much for tuning in into the EFF Book Club discussion of Black Skins, White Masks. This is important. Let's continue to read so that we learn the brilliant revolutionary Vladimir Lenin indicated and said to us. The next book that we are getting into will be announced, and the discussion is going to be also announced who will lead it. But I know that it's the national chairperson of the EFF who will be, conducting the next live conversation. So you are invited to continue reading. Okay? Please, please, Black people, I beg of you, Black people, particularly in South Africa, I beg of you, please stay at home. Let us be disciplined. Let us resist the corona war. Let us resist being killed by corona, because corona enters the Black community. Once it enters the Black communities, we have a lot of hunger. It will obliterate. Let us resist. Let us stay as people at home. But therefore, let us share the little food that we have. Do not let your neighbor sleep without food. Do not let your neighbor, you have something, let us share. That all of the who are members of class, 33% of our salaries for the next 3 months we're putting into the fight of coronavirus. We must share. We must make nobody leaves their house because they don't have bread. And people stop being corrupt, because there is nothing as self-hatred. There is no better expression of self-hate like corruption. To steal from Black people is the greatest form of self-hate and the greatest inferiority complex. Stop looting the food that is supposed to go and service the poor of the rest. And I hope that the mechanism that the government is working on to go out of the parcels and to finally make sure that Black people receive money in their accounts and go and buy food anytime they want, that can work for us and to keep us away from the towns, away from the urban areas, away from the cities. Let's stay away. Stay home. Stay free of coronavirus. Then will be guaranteed, so that we can continue the struggle for the total emancipation of Black people and humanity as a whole. Thank you very much. Amandla.